Picture this. It's late at night in medieval London. The air is thick with smoke, the streets are dimly lit, and across the River Thames, in a place just outside the strict control of the city, a different world comes alive. Lanterns glow behind wooden doors, voices murmur, coins exchange hands, and behind it all, quietly, deliberately, there is a system. Not chaos, not secrecy, a structure that has been designed to endure. This is where we begin. In the 1100s, in an area known as Southwark, prostitution was not just happening, it was being managed. Unlike what many imagine, this was not an underground trade. It was visible, organized, and most importantly, tolerated under a very specific framework. Southwark fell under the authority of the Bishop of Winchester, not the City of London itself. That separation mattered. It created a controlled zone where activities that were frowned upon elsewhere could exist under rules instead of being pushed into disorder. These establishments were known as stews, and they did not open randomly. To operate one, a person had to secure permission, effectively a license tied to land ownership and authority. The bishop's officials oversaw the district, meaning that every brothel existed within a network of accountability. This wasn't about approval in a moral sense, it was about control. Authorities believed that if such activities were going to exist, it was better to contain them than to let them spread unpredictably across the city. The people who ran these establishments were known as stewholders. They were not invisible figures operating in the shadows. They were known, identifiable, and responsible for what happened within their walls. This is one of the most important parts of the system. Responsibility was centralized. If something went wrong, there was a person to answer for it. This alone made the entire structure more stable than scattered, unregulated activity. Inside these brothels, there were rules. Some might seem surprising today. There were restrictions on operating days, often closing on religious holidays. There were expectations around conduct, and in some cases, even attempts at regulating health and hygiene, primitive as those efforts were. This tells us something crucial. The system wasn't static. It adapted. It responded to pressures, moral, religious, and practical, and adjusted to survive. And survive it did, for centuries. But why? Why did this system last so long? Even as kings changed, economies shifted, and societies evolved. The answer lies in its design. It balanced three forces: demand, control, and visibility. Demand ensured it would never disappear entirely. Control kept it from spiraling into chaos. Visibility allowed authorities to monitor and respond rather than guess and react. But why? Why did this system last so long? Even as kings changed, economies shifted, and societies evolved. The answer lies in its design. It balanced three forces: demand, control, and visibility. Demand ensured it would never disappear entirely. Control kept it from spiraling into chaos. Visibility allowed authorities to monitor and respond rather than guess and react. What changes is not the existence of the trade, but its structure. Without formal licensing, operations become more decentralized. Individuals, often women known as madams, run houses independently. Instead of being part of a recognized system, they operate in a gray area, navigating between enforcement and tolerance. Authorities sometimes crack down, but at other times, they turn a blind eye, especially when maintaining order becomes more important than strict enforcement. By the 1800s, as cities like New York and San Francisco grow rapidly, a new form of organization appears: red light districts. These are not officially sanctioned in the same way as medieval Southwark, but they function similarly. Activity becomes geographically concentrated. Everyone knows where it is. And that concentration creates a kind of informal regulation. Police know where to look. Communities know what to expect. The system, once again, finds a way to stabilize itself. This brings us to an important realization. Across both the UK and the US, two very different legal approaches, regulation versus prohibition, produced surprisingly similar outcomes. The trade persisted. The difference was in how stable and predictable it became. Now fast forward to the modern era, and you can still see echoes of these ancient systems. In parts of Nevada, for example, licensed brothels operate under strict county regulations. One well-known example is the Moonlight Bunny Ranch. It has existed in various forms since the mid-20th century, adapting to legal frameworks, ownership changes, and cultural shifts. What keeps it going is not secrecy or avoidance, but structure, licenses, inspections, zoning, and clear rules. And this is where the deeper lesson lies. The medieval system that allowed these establishments to endure was not based on complexity. It was based on clarity, a defined location, a recognized authority, a responsible operator, a set of rules, and consistent oversight. These elements created an environment where, despite economic changes or social pressure, the system could bend without breaking. Think about what happens during economic instability. When banks feel uncertain, interest rates rise, or institutions come under pressure. Businesses that rely entirely on unstable systems tend to collapse. But those that are embedded in clear, regulated frameworks often survive, not because they are immune to change, but because they are structured to adapt. In medieval Southwark, if conditions changed, whether due to disease outbreaks, religious pressure, or political shifts, the authorities didn't eliminate the system entirely. They adjusted it. They closed houses temporarily. They tightened rules. Then, when conditions stabilized, they reopened under revised terms. That flexibility was key. In early America, where no such formal system existed, stability was harder to achieve. Operations rose and fell more unpredictably. Enforcement could be inconsistent. And without a central framework, adaptation depended on individuals rather than institutions. So when you ask how such systems pass the test of time, the answer is not hidden in the nature of the business itself. It's in the structure surrounding it. Systems that endure are those that can absorb pressure without collapsing. They are visible enough to be monitored, structured enough to be controlled, and flexible enough to evolve. What medieval societies understood, perhaps better than we give them credit for, is that ignoring reality does not eliminate it. But designing systems around reality can create stability, even in uncertain times. And that is the thread that connects a dimly lit street in 12th century Southwark to modern discussions about regulation, economics, and survival. It's not about the surface details. It's about the underlying system. A system built not to deny what exists, but to manage it consistently, visibly, and over time.